Hi everyone, and welcome back to Learning Kitchen Live. We are at episode 13, which is hard to believe. My name is Valerie. I'm the manager of nutrition services here at Community Servings, and I'm really excited to be back with you today. We have some great recipes today. The topic we're going to discuss is healthy eating on a budget, and I think these recipes really encompass that. I'm going to make a frittata with mushrooms and spinach, and then a pasta dish with tuna, but it's canned tuna, but you're going to look like a rock star when you cook this because it looks really fancy, but it's super easy and budget friendly. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is cook the pasta for this pasta dish and get that going while I do some other things. So what I have here is just some boiling water, and I am going to use whole wheat penne for this dish. I'm going to use not quite the whole bag, and you could use any pasta you want. You could use spaghetti, fusilli, rotini, anything like that. I like whole wheat pasta. I know it's not everybody's thing, but so you could use whatever you have on hand in your pantry. That's the whole point. All right. Put about, that was a little bit more than 3/4 of the bag, but I'm using about 3/4 of a pound of whole wheat pasta, and I am just going to let this cook for about 10 minutes while I get other things going. So the next thing I'm going to get started on is our frittata. And for those of you who don't know, sorry, I'm being reminded to put the light on up here. Let's see. There we go. Oh, wait, no. Light, we have light. Thank you. So if you've never made a frittata before, it's like a giant omelet that's not really folded over. And the reason I chose that for today is frittatas are great vehicles for using up a lot of things that are kind of sitting around in your fridge maybe. I'm going to do mushrooms and spinach. You could put meat in these. You can actually put like leftover cooked spaghetti, any kind of vegetables. They're really versatile, and all it takes is some eggs. And they're also like super customizable to size. So I'm doing one with 8 eggs that's going to serve, what does it say? It serves about 6 people. So this would be enough for 6 people, for like as part of an entree with maybe like a side salad and some bread. But you could make this for 2 people. You could make this for a crowd and bake it. They're super easy. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to cook up the mushrooms and spinach and a little garlic. And I'm just putting a little bit of olive oil in the pan, about 2 tablespoons. And what I have here is 8 ounces of pre-sliced mushrooms. You could slice them yourself for sure, but I actually like the pre-sliced mushrooms. They're super easy. And we're just going to let those cook up and get nice and soft. So there's like I said, there's so many combinations that you can do with this. This is a really nice, easy vegetarian version that'll have a little Parmesan cheese in it, and it'll be super flavorful. The other dish we're doing is this pasta with tuna and olives, and this is so simple to do, and most people have cans of tuna and pasta on hand, right? They're kind of pantry staples, at least in my house. And so it's an easy thing to whip up when you don't have, when you don't know what else to make for dinner, because you probably have the ingredients for it. It's pretty inexpensive, and it looks really fancy when it's done, and it was so easy, you'll never believe it. So what I have here for this is just 2 cans of tuna that I drained, tuna packed in water. I'm just going to break that up in here, and we're going to add all sorts of stuff to that in a few minutes. To start that, I am going to just saute a little bit of garlic in some olive oil. that we're going to add to the tuna just to give it a little flavor. And I have some garlic that I'm going to also cut up for the mushrooms and the spinach and the omelet, or frittata. So once again, if you're just joining us, this is Learning Kitchen Live, episode 13, and I'm Valerie, and today we are talking about healthy eating on a budget, and we're making a frittata and a pasta and tuna dish. So, you know, eating on a budget can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. What I think of it as is being smart about the way you shop and stock your pantry and not letting food go to waste, which if you've been listening to our Learning Kitchen Live episodes up till now, you'll know that we're big advocates of not letting food go to waste and using things up. I think we've all tried over the course of the last 13 weeks to really cook things from pantry staples, items you have on hand, and using things that may be a little bit past their prime, but are still usable. So that's always our goal here. And one of the first things with cooking on a budget, let's have to turn this heat down a little. All right, what I'm going to do here, before I keep going with that, is I have some olive oil. I'm just going to put a little garlic in it and just cook it for like 30 seconds till it's fragrant. You don't want to burn garlic because it gets really bitter and it cooks really quickly, so just going to let that go for a second. One of the most important things you can do when trying to follow a budget for eating or not waste food is to really be a careful planner. To not just cook from the fly. And everybody does that once in a while, and that's totally okay. But when you have a plan for what you're cooking and going to eat, you can actually save a lot of money because you're only buying the things you need for what you're going to prepare. So step one to healthy eating on a budget is to make a meal plan for the week, to look at what you have, which means kind of looking at your pantry, looking at all the things in your refrigerator, figuring out what it is you need to use up or want to use up, and then planning some meals around that. I am totally guilty of occasionally buying things that I forgot I have, so it's a really good practice to survey your pantry before going grocery shopping. In fact, I recently realized I had 3 pretty large bottles of red wine vinegar. I must have needed it for something like 3 separate times and just never kept going back to check. And it'll get used, and vinegar doesn't go bad really, so it's fine, but I felt pretty silly after that. So always check what you have on hand and what you need to use up, and then build a menu around that. All right, so what I did here was I simply sauteed 2 garlic cloves in some olive oil, and I'm just to get it a little cooked and the raw flavor out of it, and I'm just gonna add that to the tuna. So that was step one, and then we'll go back to the pasta with tuna in a few minutes. And again, I don't recall if I said this. This was just 2 cans of tuna packed in water, and I actually was able to find no salt added tuna, which is my preference, but if you can't, that's fine. Tuna packed in water is not maybe as flavorful as tuna packed in olive oil. It's a little lower in calories. But really good tuna packed in olive oil would be a nice addition to this as well. But again, whatever you have on hand. All right, our pasta's coming along well here. Oops. I'm having trouble getting one of these noodles out to test. Like a few more minutes. So what we're doing here is the mushrooms for the frittata. They are nicely cooked and browned. So what I'm now going to do is add some baby spinach. I just have a container of baby spinach. I'm going to add that a handful at a time and just let that wilt in the pan. This would be great to do with any green that you, like any kind of hearty green that you have lying around the house that needs to be used up. Spinach that's maybe a little bit past its prime, kale, chard, collard greens. You just want to cook it up a little bit before you put it in the frittata, but you can get away with most greens in this. Toss any other vegetables you have in here too. Onions, would be great. I'm going to put a little garlic in. Really like peppers. Peppers would be great. No one in my house likes eating peppers after they've gotten even just a tiny bit soft, so this is a great vehicle for something like that. All right, let that finish cooking. So when you're trying to menu plan, once you've decided what you have in your house and what you need to use up, think about what your needs are for the week ahead and build a recipe around that. You know, if you're going to be busy a couple of nights, make something one night that you could eat for a few nights. And that's another great thing about eating on a budget is leftovers. I know some people have very strong feelings about leftovers. I happen to be someone who will eat leftovers for an entire week, as long as they don't go bad. So planning a meal for one night with the intent of having leftovers for the next night is always a great idea, and it stretches what you're making too. And I'll just pause here for a minute and say welcome to anyone who's joined us. This is Learning Kitchen Live. I'm Valerie, and we are talking about healthy eating on a budget and cooking on a budget today. And I'm working on a frittata right now. So I'm going to add the rest of the spinach as it wilts and just get that all cooked up. So we've talked a little bit about, figuring out what's in your pantry and looking at your calendar for the week, figuring out what it is you need to make for the week, and then planning some meals around that, perhaps with the intent of leftovers, and then crafting a grocery list out of that. And I do this every week, so it feels like second nature to me, but I know it seems a little daunting. But once you do it once or twice, it's really easy. And now that there's like literally a million websites and blogs with recipes, if you feel like one night making a pasta dish, you can literally Google pasta recipes with vegetables and you'll get a whole list of recipes that you can cook from. It's so easy to do, and it's, there are some subscription websites, but for the most part it's free. So you don't need to feel intimidated or like you don't have cookbooks or magazines or access to recipes. The internet makes that so easy. And by the way, I did Google just for fun, just to see how many results came up. I Googled frittata recipes, and the results yielded 11.1 million recipes came up from a Google or from a frittata recipe Google search. So when I say there are endless possibilities, that might quite literally be true. So once you find some recipes that you're happy with, plan your grocery list around that and just buy the things that you need, and hopefully you have some staples on hand. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pause for a moment, is add the garlic to this and let that just cook up for a second. The recipe calls for 1 clove of garlic. I'm adding 2 because I am the person who always thinks more garlic is better, so I put 2 in. And I'm going to add just a tiny bit of salt and pepper, about a 1/4 teaspoon of each. And there's some really strange noise coming out of our kitchen right now. Which we don't know what that was, but it's stopped. So that was a really, I don't know if you all heard that, but that was like a really loud screeching noise in the background. Maybe it was one of our hoods, but nothing's exploded, so hopefully we're good. What I am going to do here next for the frittata is the egg parts. So what I have here is 8 eggs that I've cracked with a couple tablespoons of milk, and I am just going to whisk this up. Get that all nice and incorporated, and then I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. Again, you could add any cheese that you like. I actually think this would taste really good with like Swiss or Gruyere or cheddar. So I'm just going to add a 1/4 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. You could go without the cheese if you're dairy free. You don't have to add the milk. You could just add a little water to loosen up the eggs. All right, and now what I'm going to do, just to finish this up, I'm just going to check my pasta first. I don't want to overcook this. I think that's just about done. I'm going to add the mushrooms and spinach to this. I'm going to give this pan a good spray with non-stick spray just to make sure the frittata doesn't burn or stick too much. And then I'm actually going to put this right back in and turn the heat on again. So when making a frittata, there's a little bit of a technique to it, but you know what? If you don't get it, that's totally okay because it's going to cook no matter what you do. So put everything back in, and again, this is very much like making an omelet, and I'm just trying to spread out the ingredients a little bit. Let me just turn my pasta off too. And what you want to do is kind of a few times just scrape around the sides, kind of scrape in and let the eggs run through, just to make sure getting some layers in there. And what I'm going to do next is just cover this and let it go for about 8 minutes and then finish it off in the oven. So I'm just going to turn the heat down a little bit, and I'm going to put a cover on this. Now, we had a cover here that fit this. If you did not have a cover that fit your frying pan at home, you could use like a cookie sheet, a baking sheet. You could invert another frying pan on top of it. You don't necessarily need one that fits. We just happen to have one here. All right, so while that's cooking, we're gonna do the rest of this pasta dish. So in here we have tuna and some garlic that was sauteed in olive oil. I am going to dump my pasta out. I couldn't reach the colanders in the kitchen, so one of our amazing chefs reached one for me, and he gave me the world's largest colander for like a ½ pound of pasta. So I wish I had this industrial size thing at home. Oops. You know what I did want to do and I forgot? I wanted to save a little bit of the cooking butter. No problem. There we go. Saved a little bit of that before it all got away. The cooking water from pasta is a great addition to a lot of sauces because it's got some of that starch in it, and it can nicely thicken up a sauce after you've made one. So the next thing that's going to happen here is I'm going to take this little skillet and just heat up a little bit of basic marinara sauce, about a cup of it. Now, this is something I think most people have on hand usually. You could just use canned tomatoes too and season them a little bit. I was just going the super easy route with the marinara sauce today. If you can find low sodium marinara sauce, it's preferable. They're really hard to find. I couldn't yesterday actually. I'm just going to heat that up a tiny bit, and I'm going to season it, because this is my preference, with a little bit of crushed red pepper flakes. Again, don't have to do that. But the marinara sauce is already seasoned really well with salt and pepper, so and basil, so you don't really need to do much else to it. Something else that goes along with healthy eating on a budget is saving food in a way so that it doesn't spoil. So I used a cup of this sauce. Now, tomato sauce, even though it's super acidic, will go bad eventually. If you leave that in your fridge for a couple of weeks, it's going to start growing some mold. Something that's really good to do is freeze that. Stick it in a Ziploc bag and put it in your freezer, and then the next time you need marinara sauce, you just break off a chunk of however much you need, heat it up, and you have sauce for pasta, for pizza, for whatever it is you're doing. That's like a really great way to prevent spoilage with something like that. I also am using for this dish some pitted Kalamata olives. These things will keep forever in your fridge, frankly. They're not going to go bad. Olives are a great addition. You don't have to add a lot for a lot of flavor, and it kind of looks fancy. If you don't like olives, leave them out. You could use green olives. You could use just the plain black olives that are not kind of the really salty, bitter ones. Again, anything goes. I'm going to let that heat up for just a couple of minutes. And check on my frittata here. So as you can see, this is starting to set really nicely. Actually, this is probably ready to go in the oven. What you want to see is that the frittata is setting, which it is, sticking a little bit. But what you're going to notice is there is still like a layer of liquid on the top. What I'm going to do is stick this in the oven for a few minutes. I don't have a broiler here, but I think just a regular super powerful convection oven will do the trick. You stick it in for 2 or 3 minutes and let that finish cooking, and then that will be done. So, let me see the oven this goes. Alright, so our pasta sauce is heated, almost heated up. The other things that are going to go into this, what? Oh, thank you very much. I was just pointed out to me that my burner was still on, which I didn't even notice. I have a gas stove, I have an electric stove at home, and I'm not used to the gas. I'm used to all the lights telling me things are on and hot. All right. So what's going to happen with the rest of this is the marinara sauce is going to go in here, the pasta is going to go back in, the olives, and a little bit of the water, cooking water, if I need to loosen it up. So let's finish this up. This is about a half a cup of those olives that I just quartered. You know, some other additions that would be great for this dish would be capers, if you liked those. You could throw greens in this, like if you wanted to get rid of some spinach or other greens, you could stick them in with the pasta in the last 2 minutes of cooking and just let them wilt a little bit and drain them and just throw them in together. Let's go check on that frittata because it's going to cook really fast. Perfect. Now, if you were doing this at home, it might have taken a few more minutes. We have these super turbocharged ovens here, so things cook really fast. But what you'd notice is that it's set, there's no, it's nice and firm in the middle, and there's no more liquid on the top. So this is kind of what you want. I'm just going to add my pasta back to this. From the world's largest colander. And just mix that up. the good stuff mixed in. I actually think this could use like a hint of green. I think spinach would be nice in it. I don't have any parsley on hand, but finishing it with a little parsley or basil would be like really, make it look really pretty, and it would make it look even like fancier. I think this could use a little bit more moisture, so this is just that pasta cooking water that I saved. And there we go. I'll plate these up in a minute. But how easy was that? That, you know, in the span of 30 minutes, 2 great meals, all from pantry staples. You know, the last items that I haven't touched on with cooking and healthy eating on a budget is looking out for things like sales in your grocery store, but only buying extra or in bulk of items you really need. So, you know, it's tempting sometimes to buy, like, especially in good places like Costco, to buy like big packages of things. But if you're really truly not going to use it, don't buy it, because it's just going to waste in your pantry, and you're going to feel bad about it. So look for coupons, look for sales, look for store brand items. Often the store brand items are exactly the same as the real brand, like the other brands. So that's a really easy way to save a good amount of money. So especially things like tuna, pasta, you don't have to be fancy with those. Buy the store brand. No one's going to know the difference. And then again, buying things that aren't going to go to waste, especially things like frozen vegetables are great staples to keep on hand. Canned vegetables when they're low sodium, frozen fruits. Those are all great ways to get fruits and vegetables into your diet and not worry about creating waste if you're not going to get to eat all of them. All right, so dish number 1 is this beautiful pasta dish with tuna and olives. And then dish number 2 is going to be this frittata. Ooh, it's hot. Forgot this one in the oven and just touched the metal handle. Don't do that at home. I'm just going to cut that up. Hopefully oh, I forgot a spatula to lift this out of here. And there we go. A mushroom and spinach frittata with some Parmesan cheese. Have there been any questions?
I thought pasta vegetarian.
You could make it vegetarian. I mean, you can do any kind of riff on this. So if you didn't want tuna in it, I forgot to mention canned salmon would probably be pretty tasty in this too. If you didn't want fish or anything in it, you could just make this pasta dish without anything. You could use tofu crumbles. I mean, this is like kind of almost like endless possibilities. Canned chicken would be good. That's not vegetarian. But I would say tofu crumbles. I would probably, if I were making it vegetarian, I'd throw in a can of rinsed and drained cannellini beans. That would be really delicious and add some protein and heft to it. So lots of different variations on that. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us again for Learning Kitchen Live. We will see you next week, and happy cooking.